Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. A new round of Iran nuclear talks resumed in Vienna on Monday. A European Union diplomat, Enrique Mora, chaired the negotiations. This is the 8th round of efforts to salvage the 2015 Iran nuclear deal since early April. It's an in-person meeting among representatives from Iran and major powers which signed the original accord: China, France, Germany, Russia, and Britain. The U.S. participated indirectly. Iran emphasized the need to lift all sanctions on its oil industry. Earlier this month, the Biden administration imposed the new sanctions on Iran on the sidelines of the last round of talks. In the year 2018, then U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement and unilaterally reimposed the sanctions on Iran. In response, Iran has gradually stopped carrying out parts of its commitment to the deal since 2019. The Chinese envoy to the United Nations called on all sides in the talks to seek consensus and to work towards a breakthrough. Let's take a listen.
There are two major issues. One is in the nuclear area, how Iran restrains itself, and the other is the lifting of sanctions, in which the United States takes key position. We stress the view of right and wrong at the very beginning. Who withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal and who imposed the sanctions should be the one to take steps. This is the original intention of this round of talks.
For more on Iran nuclear talks, joining us in Vienna, Mohammad Marandi, a professor of Tehran University and advisor to the Iranian delegation for nuclear talks. Good to see you, Professor. Long time no see.
Thank you.
Happy New Year to you. In Rome as well,
Thank you.
Alistair Crook, a
to you.
former British diplomat who is a former EU envoy for the Middle East. He's also the director and founder of the Conflicts Forum. Good to see you, sir. Happy New Year. In Beijing, Zhao Tong, thank you, a senior fellow of the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Good to see you, Mr. Zhao. Long time no see as well. Washington did not participate directly this time, indirectly, that is, and therefore making the European counterparts in these talks very important, not only representing themselves, but also try to see how to bring all the parties together. Mr. Crook, how much do you think that issue will be discussed? Will that be the key?
Well, of course, lifting of sanctions is bound to be the big issue from an Iranian position. But from the American position, I would expect to see other things. They will want to know what is going to happen to the centrifuges, because during this period of hiatus, Iran has installed very new and sophisticated centrifuges. And I believe the Americans will not accept that they continue in position. They'll want them exported or destroyed. That has not been agreed. I don't think it's been agreed also what the Iranians would like us to go back to the original agreement, the 2019 agreement, as it was. But America actually wants a follow-on. It doesn't want just the agreement. It wants a Mark II JCPOA, which addresses other issues, such as ballistic missiles and the political relations Iran has with certain movements in the region. And I don't think that is actually either going to be a very easy issue to address. So there are more than just the question of the lifting of sanctions. There's the whole question of the program. Then there will be the question of whether Iran agrees to a follow-on agreement. Almost certainly they won't.
I see. Mr. Zhao, now China is a participant of the earlier 2015 talks, and this time as well. Now, China and the United States have been talking about international issues in which the two countries could cooperate, which including multilateral issues like Iran nuclear issue. However, this time, U.S. did not participate directly. But at the same time, China and Iran have been having some very good relationship over the past years. So how do you see the role of China and the early arguments made by the China representative at the Vienna round of talks?
Well, as you mentioned, China was a very important player in the last round of negotiations. And I think over time, the Chinese role is only becoming even more important. As you said, the United States is not directly participating, and therefore there is more responsibility falling on the shoulders of other countries, including China, to help mediate between the United States and Iran. And in this regard, as the United States tries to reduce its footprint in the region, China has been trying to play a more constructive role in regional affairs. Earlier this year, Chinese officials, including senior diplomats, visited the region and called for a regional multilateral Gulf security dialogue. China wants to play a more important role, both in investing more in regional economic development, but also playing a more constructive role in helping promoting regional stability and peace. So China has balanced relations with all the relevant players in the region, with Iran, with Israel, with Saudi Arabia. All these countries have a stake in this negotiation. So I think China is in an increasingly important position to help all relevant parties advance and defend their interests and strike a balanced deal.
Professor Morandi is having some difficulties connecting to us now, but we hope we'll be able to talk to him soon. If not, maybe on the phone. Then let me come to you, Mr. Crook, because now there is the issue of sequence. 2015 agreement signed. Then unilateral withdrew from the agreement by the Trump administration. And then we see further sanctions coming from the Biden administration, which politically, at least internally, trying to make a huge difference between them and the Trump administration, but not necessarily on the Iranian nuclear issue, it seems. So how should we understand the evolution of politics in Washington for the Europeans to be able to cut their own role precisely, particularly in making sure the deal can still be a deal, because that's the utmost interest for everyone?
Well, perhaps it's the utmost interest for everybody, but the question is there a deal that would satisfy the United States, Israel, and be valid in Iran as well? And it's quite difficult to see with such different agendas that that's really the case. I think a second point that is important is really now the deal that we are looking at, the original deal, I mean, is really a snapshot of an earlier time. It's much earlier in time. Much has changed in Iran. There are new technology, new equipment that is there. So it's not very clear whether it's possible to go back to that. But the thing I would just say is, we're facing, and the Americans face, a catch-22 situation. They know they have to lift sanctions in order to get a deal. That's clear. Iran will not do it without lifting sanctions. But if they lift all sanctions, then they don't have any pressure point in order to push Iran to go to JCPOA and put their missiles on the table and their conduct and their relations with other movements in the region. So they want to do both. They want to have their cake and to eat it. They want to lift a bit of sanctions, but not all of them, so they still have some pressure that they can apply to Iran.
Okay.
I'm not sure this is going to be viable, but we will have to see.
Mr. Zhao, now, it seems that everybody is facing a catch-22 situation in different circumstances, it seems, in this negotiation. So how to break that catch-22 situation, where to start if there is any hope? Or the politics actually would love to see that this will be the situation for years to come, so that everybody will have their roles to play and also work with this issue while working on the other issues as well. Mr. Zhao, tell us more about how to break this catch-22 situation if there's a desire.
Well, thank you for your trust in me in raising a solution to this challenge. I think the parties need to be realistic about what is achievable. the so-called JCPOA plus or JCPOA 2 or more for more type of deal is really hard to imagine at this point. If we want to also limit Iran's regional behavior, if we want to limit Iran's missile program, we may also have to take other regional countries' missile programs into consideration at the same time. We know that Israel, Turkey, and other regional countries, UAE, for example, they are all developing their missile programs. Saudi Arabia is another case in point. So if we want to constrain Iranians' missile and other military technologies, we may have to set up a broader regional discussion and dialogue to address that. But as a first step, maybe we should consider a less for less type of deal. We may have to focus on the nuclear issue first and foremost. Maybe it is hard for Iran to fully walk back all its nuclear progress since 2015. So maybe the U.S. and other countries would have to accept some Iranian nuclear progress. In return, I think it is also impossible for the United States to completely remove all sanctions imposed since the Trump administration, because some of the sanctions are not directly related to nuclear issues, which means Iran would have to accept a situation where only some of the nuclear-related sanctions would be lifted. So if both countries can be flexible in starting with a less-for-less type of deal, maybe that's a more productive way to start a substantive negotiation.
Right. We only have 30 seconds left, it seems, according to the clock. Mr. Crook, what can you say within 30 seconds in terms of remedy, for this round at least?
I don't think there is an easy remedy in this round to those problems, and a deal of less for less will not work because, of course, what bank, what company will take the risk of dealing with Iran if they find that in a few weeks' time all the sanctions are reimposed by the United States and they're subject to secondary sanctions?
Alistair Crook, Mohammad Marandi, last but not least, Zhao Tong. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. We do need different voices in all these discussions, particularly now amid all the changes going on in the world. Really appreciate that, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.